Lawndale. Beginners of class. I'm Emily Benz, Lawndale's Public Program Coordinator, and tonight Lawndale is thrilled to partner with Artadia for the event, Art and Dialogue. We're especially excited to partner with Artadia. Their mission is to support contemporary artists across the United States through merit-based awards and networking opportunities. And ours is to serve artists in our exhibitions, public programs, and artist studio programs. Tonight, Lawndale and Artadia partner for Art and Dialogue Houston, and it will feature San Juan-based artist Beatriz Santiago Muñoz, speaking not only about her artistic practice, but also the aftermath of Hurricane Maria. Without a doubt, tonight's talk will resonate post-Harvey. Tonight's talk will be followed by a Q&A, and all of this will be recorded and available on Lawndale's website and also Artadia's website. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Jonathan Gardenhire from Artadia, their program coordinator.
Hello, everyone. Quite a bit of information for everyone. I'll try to go as quickly as possible. But thank you so much. We're really excited to partner with Lawndale on this program. Once again, my name is Jonathan Gardenhire, and I'm the program coordinator at Artadia. Artadia's mission is to support artists across the country. So over the past 20 years, we've given grants to about over 300 artists, totaling more than $3 million. In Houston, we've given grants since 2003, and we've awarded over 60 artists unrestricted grants. And a lot of our Artadia awardees are here, so thank you for coming. Once again, Art and Dialogue is a program that was really kind of created out of feedback from our awardees. One of the one form of support that awardees really wanted was to be connected with curators and artists and have dialogue with individuals in the art communities outside of their cities. And I think just in general, we are in a very kind of, times are weird these days, environmentally, politically, I could go on. But the ways that we define and celebrate our communities is so crucial, and I really think that artists, designers, and other cultural producers are at the center of that. Once again, it's really great to support artists and to have this type of dialogue happen, which leads me to people who I should thank. This program wouldn't be possible, of course, without the support of Lawndale, but also through the support of the Houston Endowment, the Brown Family Foundation, Artadia members both in Houston and across the country, and our board of directors. So once again, Beatriz Santiago Muñoz is here from San Juan, Puerto Rico. Her work arises out of long periods of observation and documentation in which the camera is present as an object with social implications, as an instrument meditating aesthetic thought. Her films frequently start out through research into specific social structures, individuals, or events, which she transforms into performance and moving image. Santiago Muñoz's recent work has been concerned with post-military land, Haitian poetics, and speculative futures. Recent exhibitions include Song Strategy Sign at the New Museum, Universe of Fragile Mirrors at the Pérez Art Museum of Miami, La Cabeza Mató at Todos, and Teorética San Jose, Costa Rica, and the list goes on. She is a recipient of the 2015 Creative Capital Visual Arts Award, and her work is included in public and private collections such as the Guggenheim Museum, Bronx Museum, as well as other private and public collections. She's the co-founder of Beta Local, an arts organization in San Juan, Puerto Rico, and without further ado, here is Beatriz.
Okay, can you guys hear me if I speak like this? Yes. Okay. If you can't, be great if you just come up. I think just to give you an idea of what I'm going to try to do before well, I don't need to turn it off quite yet, but I can speak in the dark. Okay, so first I make films and videos. I also sometimes make objects and drawings, but really I make mostly film and video, so I feel like it's important to give you an idea of the kind of work that I make. and I'll show 2 short works first before I speak a lot more. They're each about 7-8 minutes. They're in Spanish but subtitled. We're working with a little speaker, not a huge speaker, so you might need to move up close if you have some trouble listening. And yeah, I'll speak about the work afterwards within the context of other things that I've been working on. But then, besides talking a bit about my work, I wanted also to speak a bit about Beta Local, which is an organization that I helped to start in Puerto Rico about 10 years ago. I can't believe that it's been 10 years. So I'll talk a little bit about that because I want to talk a bit about these walking seminars that I've been teaching for a few years. And the reason why I'm going to talk about those 2 things as well is because Jonathan asked me to respond to the question of how things are right now after the hurricane, and that work with Beta Local and the seminars are the way in which I can speak about what has been happening after the hurricane. So first I'll show these 2 films, one after the other. And then I talk about all this. And please, I guess other than during the films, you can interrupt me while I'm speaking and ask questions.
Cuando yo contesto una llamada, hablo con 3 o 4. Tienen problemas serios, tú sabes, porque a mí no me preocupa la vida de nada. ¿Qué? Ya voy para 65, así que... ¿Oíste? Aquí más que aquí. Yo me vine con él, ¿sabes? Para acá como medio loco. Estamos organizando para comprar una finca en Orocovi. No en la montaña, pasó una comuna grande. Y dije, pues yo voy para allá con ustedes. Pues nada, yo metido ahí, tú sabes, de presentar. Yo no era ningún hippie, no, pues, entonces habían unas comunas acá y entonces yo vine a vivir en una de ellas, tú sabes, con una cabeza que lo que me pedía era virar el mundo al revés. Y me dio una bofetada y me dijo, como que me dijo, pero si no cambias todo, no cambias nada. Yo no sé si tú lo puedes entender en el campo espiritual, pero hasta los indígenas han usado, especialmente los taínos, vamos a hablar de los taínos ya que estamos hablando de aquí, alucinógenos para ampliar su conocimiento. Porque las drogas sirven para ampliar conocimiento. Según sirven para dormir conocimiento, pueden servir para ampliar la mente. Me ha servido más. O sea, amplié mi mente y la abrí y vi, podría decir, otro universo y me atrajo hasta aquí y de ahí he ampliado toda mi mente y me sigue ampliando porque esto no para, tú sabes, el saber, el aprender todos los días, yo me meto a esa tierra y es un campo de aprendizaje enorme. Yo estoy ahí trabajando todo el momento con plantas y viéndolas como crecen, buscándole sus necesidades, bregando con ellas. En el campo de la apicultura, eso para mí eso fue lo más grande, tú sabes. Ellos me fueron a buscar a mí, yo no las fui a buscar a ellas. Ellas me buscaron a mí, las abejas. Ay. Ya está más seco.
Nacen de un huevo. no llevan arco y flecha, ni canasta. Ocupan un espacio entre medio. No glorifican la maternidad ni la guerra. Caen como la fruta de un árbol.
So the first one is called Artadia, after the lake that was shot near. The man in the film, his name is Pablo Díaz-Cuadrado. A few years before I made Madruya, I had been making a film called Pharmacopoeia about specific species of plants that you can sort of read through them or understand the history of a place like you would thinking about a specific kind of architecture. You know? Yeah. So I grew up in the city in San Juan sort of thinking this is a tree and that is a tree without understanding, without being able to read the history of how that tree or that plant arrived there, or what it is that that plant is replacing that is no longer there. So I grew up without an idea that nature is constructed and that is just as historically contingent as the buildings that you have around you. So when I was making that film, I was thinking about tobacco and cotton, which are there because of the agricultural histories that planted them, but also I was trying to think about the landscape that wasn't there anymore. So, for example, I learned that there was a tree called Hippomane mancinella, which covered the entire coast of Puerto Rico, and it's referred to as the little apple of death. It's very, very poisonous. It's so poisonous that, of course, if you eat the apple, you will die, but also if you are lying underneath it and it rains and the rain falls through the leaves, if you cut it, the sap will burn your skin, a very bad burn, and if you try to burn it, the smoke of it could blind you. So it was a tree that, for all these reasons, was used by indigenous people in the island, and because of those reasons as well, it was eradicated. I was making that film about and looking for these species of plants that were really hard to find because nobody else was planting them anymore or knew the history. And so there was one specific plant that I was looking for that everybody kept saying, the only person that maybe will know something about this is Pablo Díaz-Cuadrado. You have to go find him someplace in Orocovis. And so I did find him, and that plant made it into the film. But also when I was there and spoke to him and saw his house and the way that it was built with the mountain, so that the side of his house are rocks that are embedded within the hill, and the house, everything that you see, all those objects that you see, they might seem as if they are disorganized, but in fact there is an order and there is a reason why each one is in each place. For me, it's very nostalgic to see all these films because even though an untrained eye might see disorder, that is a place that is organized according to his logic. It is like a perfect example of thinking with the place or thinking with the species. And I show this film because I think it's a good example of what I am trying to do, which is think with him. No? I know that he is thinking with the plants, and because he's thinking with the plants and because he's thinking with the place, he's able to see certain things that I can't. And so, and to think in certain ways, I think that there are, just as when you are with a particular friend or family member or somebody that you know well, you are able to think with them in particular ways. You can also think in particular ways with a place. There's actually a kind of neuroscience theory of this, like the expanded mind, you know, like your cognitive process is not inside your brain, it's actually embedded in all the things of the world. Because if you think about sound when you look at the speaker, then obviously this cognitive process is dependent on the speaker. So this idea of thinking with materials and thinking sensorially, thinking with the world, thinking with another person is something that is important to me, and that is what I return to in my work. The second film, the person that appears in the film, her name is Michelle Nono, and she's also somebody that cultivates specific plants, but also has a kind of much larger informal education project and is a performer. So that those two films maybe inhabit two different places in the scope of the kind of work that I make. One that began in a very organic way, and I'm following him around and then structuring it as I'm following it around. And then the other one, I know her quite well, we're friends, and that script was written thinking with her and thinking about her. And so it's a kind of, the entire, it's a way of thinking that arises in between her and I, thinking about androgyny. And both films, strangely, kind of, I think, have something to do with everything that's happened after the hurricane, but they were made a couple of years before. So I think that it's because, of course, like everything that's happened after the hurricane doesn't come out of nowhere. It comes from the colonial histories, extraction economies. It comes from a transformation of the place through different kinds of violence, but also everything. There's other things that have happened as well. A kind of thinking with the place that has happened since. Today is the anniversary of the hurricane, actually, 20th of September. So there's a bunch of articles that came out today. I don't know if you have seen them with like New York Times. Everybody's done this like 1 year afterwards, and to me it feels like 2 weeks have gone by. So I'll just show you stills from other works in order to be able to speak a bit about other projects. Please feel free to ask me if there's something that you want to ask me. These are stills from Madruya. So I've been working on a film which is a kind of beautiful albatross for a few years. It's based on a book published in 1969 by Monique Witty, French experimental writer, a French writer of experimental novels. And so this book, Le Guerrier, is like, tiny little thing, maybe it's like 80 pages. It narrates, it's the least of what it does is narrate, but it describes a world in which there is a war against patriarchy. It is a war between women and men, or between the she's and the rest of the world. The most beautiful thing that happens in the text is that she's trying to invent a new form, a new language with which to speak about this. So it has a circular structure, and the text is traversed with names of women written in capital letters that cross it like a column. And there really is no, even though there's, that there are battles happening, there really isn't there are no protagonists. There's a sense of a collective, but no real individuals are followed through the text. And the description is all about blood and how something feels and the way that light shines on the weapons, and there's sort of sci-fi aspects of it. Women enter a city that they're about to destroy, and they have these half orbs that spew out light, and with this light they destroy the city. It's a pretty amazing text. So I'm trying to make a film which does what that text does. It's really a very, very loose adaptation, but it requires work with many individual, real women, and this is one of them. And I'm trying to create a kind of visual language that is equally material, sensorial, but sort of spread out horizontally as what Monique Wittig does in her text.
What's the name of the story?
Les Guerriers, which the warriors, and I've seen it. Yeah, it is translated. I think actually Ubu, the website that has everything in the world for free. Well, not everything in the world, but has a copy of it in English, a PDF. I'll come back to this image. So this is from the film, the Verano de Mujeres, the film that is a loose adaptation. I'm also trying to collaborate with a lot of these women so that we're also trying to create a new language from the kinds of work that they do. So this is a bit of a scene with Marian Perez, who is a lighting designer, and we're trying to create a language from the lights. And I'm jumping around here because I don't think I can talk about everything. So you know how you think that you're making work about all sorts of things, and then when you look at everything together, you realize that there are certain things that you keep going back to. So I've made a series of works that are kind of disconnected, but they're all that have to do with the histories of the anti-colonial movement in Puerto Rico. So this is from a film called Prisoner Cinema that I made. The person behind this mask is Elisam Escobar, who is both an artist and the person that spent 19 and a half years in prison for his political work, so a political prisoner. Prisoner Cinema is about, it takes the entire audio track is from text that Elisam wrote while he was in prison. For about 7 of the 19 and a half years, he wrote a prison diary. He calls it an anti-diary, and it's really a diary of mental processes, of the ways that his subjectivity was splitting into several personalities, of the relationship that he had with the little insects in his cell. It's a diary of the transformation of ways of thinking through through the sensorial, through his sensorial space. So what you're listening to is something that he wrote when he was in prison, but what you're seeing is very everyday, banal, quotidian life in freedom. So what happens is there is a kind of rubbing against each other of this description of mental processes and the unspectacular nature of freedom, and what it looks like, which is like nothing at all. There's always, I'd say that I try to, in my work, both begin from a person or a group of people or a place that I am thinking with, but also provoke a process of playing and inventing. So a lot of Elissam's paintings, he returns to the figure of the vejigante, which is a kind of mythological, folkloric character in Puerto Rico. It's a kind of half man, half goat monster, and the reason why he returns to it is because of the monstrous nature of a human imprisoned. The idea of, because of what that does. So,
I was wondering, what got him released from prison?
How was he released from prison?
Actually, he was there so long.
Yeah, he was actually sentenced to, I believe, 80 years, not 19 and a half, but there was a very, there was a movement in Puerto Rico to excarcelar, ¿cómo se dice? To free political prisoners. So there was a lot of collective pressure. This happened. He was not the only person in prison. There were another 20 also in prison, and others that were not liberated at that time. But this all happened around 2001, 2002. When was Clinton's last year in? 2000? Yeah. So it was, last week of Clinton's administration, yes.
Did he get any compensation for, I believe, his time as president was very unfair? Do you agree?
Oh, but the U.S. government has never admitted that he was a political prisoner, and the conditions of his release did not call him a political prisoner. In fact, even though all of the people who were in prison were there for the crime, specifically for the crime of seditious conspiracy, they were never treated as political. You couldn't say the words political prisoner in the relationship in asking the government to release them. In fact, to treat them each as individual cases, not as a collective group of political prisoners.
Going back to the videos that you showed us, what were the hallucinogens Pablo and Michelle were cultivating?
Oh, so there's a tree that appears in the film that has those trumpet-like flowers. It's called Brugmansia versicolor.
Are they the same trees that are poisonous, the ones you were talking about?
No, they're not. One of the things that I learned thinking about all these kinds of plant species is that depending on how you use it, everything is poisonous.
Yes.
There are some things that are very poisonous and that you can't avoid being poisonous. Eggplant can be poisonous. So I guess in answer to that, it could be if you drink a lot of the tea.
Right.
But one of the things that I was interested in as well is that he built his house in relationship to this tree with which he had a hallucination. He saw his life in the future, and he created it around the tree. And I was interested in following this idea of thinking with this plant.
And that culture, growing with nature and harvesting these hallucinogens in order to gain greater knowledge, is that lost completely? Well, not lost completely, but is that only found in, I'd say, lower income areas in Puerto Rico? And you won't find that anywhere in the city or...
No, I think it's pretty widespread, actually.
Pretty widespread?
Yeah.
Okay. Was Michelle, was she under the influence of that?
Michelle, no.
When she was dancing?
No, she was not under, she was under the influence of, the power of her body.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I understand.
Yeah. But I don't mind the questions either. I mean, I think that there's interesting parallels between kind of the hallucination with the plant and also thinking with form, thinking with art, thinking like being transformed by the scale of the inside of a church, you know?
I was also wondering, in South America they have something called ayahuasca, and that pretty much has a chemical that's called EMT. Do you know the chemical to the hallucinogens that they're trying?
Yeah, but this tree does not, this flower does not have that specifically.
Oh.
But there's something else called jojoba that it's not exactly the same thing, but has the same effects. Yeah. So this film that I made with Elisam has a kind of parallel film that I made with Jan Sussler, who was the lawyer who represented all of these political prisoners. That's a film I recently finished, and that Su Chang, sitting right here, did sound for when I was in Chicago. I've been, these other images here, here we go. I made a series of films about post-military land, 4 films, about different ways of thinking. These U.S. bases that occupy a lot of land in Puerto Rico have not just physically occupied land, but also created a kind of image in our minds that sort of don't allow any other kinds of thoughts to occupy the same space. And I think that thinking visually or filmmaking is an important tool in order to think with these places. This is a still from a film called Ojos para mis enemigos, Eyes for my enemies. The man in the image is Pedro Ortiz, and he's someone who used to live when he was a child within the territory that then became the Navy base when people were expropriated and pushed out of the land. And he is an actor, actually. He has a theater in Ceiba where the base is, but also he is an activist who for many years fought the presence of the base, and now that the base is closed, he's part of a group of people that have begun entering the space of the base as individuals and giving it different uses. So even though this is not a documentary, and if you saw it, it's kind of a bit hallucinatory as well. At this moment, what he's doing is picking bits of cotton. It is cotton that grows there because of the way the land was used even before it was a base, but it is now a kind of overgrown cotton that it is useless to that economy, and that is important, no? That it's not, the way that he is using it is not a kind of nostalgic memory of that time, because there's nothing to be be nostalgic about. But he's picking it because he's giving gifts of white to Obatala. He practices Santeria, and Obatala is his head saint, and Obatala takes gifts in white. So at the beginning of the film, he's asking permission from his saints to take me throughout the base and show me certain things that he can show me. And then at the end of the film, he's collecting this cotton in order to give back to Obatala.
I have a question. In Cuba, Santeria, like numerology, like that's a really big thing. Like there's like numbers, and those numbers harbor, I guess you can say, premonitions. Mm-hmm. Is that something similar in Puerto Rico with Santeria?
Well, Santeria is a practice that derives from Yoruba traditions.
Yeah.
So, although I think that there's a lot of numbers thinking in Santeria, I think what you're talking about, numerology, is a different thing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, I think that with any syncretic religious practice, like Santeria, I mean, I've been to Santeros that have Yoda among their figurines, you know? So I can't say, that is, oh, this doesn't have anything to do with it. When I think that it really depends. It's a practice that kind of takes all that says from there, yes, from there, that too. Like whatever.
Very personalized.
Well, I say that, but again, it depends who you talk to. Some people might be very strict about it. Some people are not. Obviously, that Santero with Yoda and Nanto was not very strict about it. It's kind of hard to talk about the films without actually showing you the films. Right. But
did Michelle practice Santeria by any time?
I wouldn't say that she would say that she is a practitioner. It's a hard question. There's a lot of aspects of it that are, it's kind of like, asking somebody in Puerto Rico, this place is very Catholic, like, are you Catholic? It's like, well, I'm not practicing, I go to church every Sunday, but I guess I'm culturally Catholic, you know. There's that. Before I talk about this, So I made a film with Pedro Ortiz, which is, has to do with this, with what I just spoke about. I also made a film in the cinema of the base, which is about seeing a different kind of film that is not the kind of film that was projected there for 60 years, but is the film that the light coming through the trees, the new forest arising, creates. So I don't know if you can tell, but that's the movie theater seats, and the film is really about the sounds, the sounds and the images that the cinema produces, the entire thing. So there's like ceiling tiles in the cinema in order, to catch the sound. But now there's huge beehives in between the ceiling tiles and the top, so that's the soundtrack of any film that you could imagine being in that theater. For a long time, I really wanted to steal the screen, which is amazing, and it's, split down the middle, but every time I went in to try to steal it, we got caught. We tried 3 times. It's gigantic. It's like a 30-foot tall thing.
So it's not bended, it's still guarded, but...
What's that?
The cinema itself is not bended, it's still guarded, I think.
Well, it's a huge base, and even though it's closed, there's town police coming through, there's the National Guard kept a little office there, there's little things happening, and taking down that, I went in and shot 4 films, and nothing happened to me, but stealing a huge screen was a different, like it required a big truck and it didn't work. Yeah, it would have been beautiful. This is also a steal. This is all, I don't know, mixed up, but this is also a steal from Verano de Mujeres. Part of the language with light that Marian Pérez is inventing. So instead of talking about all these different films, I think that I will talk about not being able to shoot a little bit. This is actually an image from. I've been shooting here and there after the hurricane, but just the kind of obscene visual presence of misery, and pain after the hurricane made it really, really hard for me to look through a camera or to do that to people, just to stand, in front of someone and shoot. So a lot of what I shot has been, we go to help somebody who still has a bunch of trees in her property, and I wind up the camera, I leave it hanging from a branch, and I go, help take the trees down like everybody else. So, even the idea of being an observer, while there is so much work to do, just seemed it wasn't something that I could do. But this is an image from one of the, maybe it was the third week after the hurricane, and I went to Vieques, which is a place that I've shot a lot. It was also a place that was part of a big Navy base and bombed for 60 years. And a place where I know a lot of people who I have collaborated with. And so I went to help, because they were really disconnected, even more than anybody else, being an island off of the main island. And weirdly, when I arrived, everybody was in a way they're like cowboys out there, so they were really a lot more together than people in the city were. Because things like just understanding that nobody was coming to help was a really, it was a place where everybody was working from, that everybody really had to organize themselves. And this day that I arrived, the rains, I guess this is something that you all know something about here in Houston, rains and flooding. The rains were so terrible that in Vieques, which is a place that there are no rivers in, there was suddenly a new river. And the new river had blocked the way from the north side of the island to the south side of the island. So all of a sudden at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, nobody could get from the north to the south side. And I didn't see anybody freaking out. But this idea of, I've been thinking a lot about disorder. I'm sure you saw all those images of, if you look up Hurricane Puerto Rico and just see what is the predominant image, you'll see maybe a single individual in a sea of destruction, which more than destruction, what is a kind of overwhelming disorder, where what used to be house is no longer house, or what used to be road is no longer road, and that experience is not just something that is in the image, but it's actually the experience of everyday life during, if not now, during many months after the hurricane, was one of really disconcerting disorder.
After 9/11 in New York, there was a heavy sense of camaraderie between all the New Yorkers.
A what?
A sense of friendship, yeah. The whole community came together. Do you think Puerto Rico something similar happened? And were you trying to get that camaraderie of being a good neighbor in your videos compared to that destruction that you're talking about?
I wasn't trying to shoot that either. I was just very, and still am really thinking about what images do and what a kind of discourse of disorder does, because I've been thinking about the history of images of people and their homes, of poor people and their homes, and the idea, and I think that there is actually a relationship, if you look at the history of those images, between that image of absolute overwhelming disorder and displacement, and saying there's nothing here anymore, and actually a land takeover, and the mass displacement of people, which is what's happening right now.
Do you feel like your work eventually revolves around nature?
If I had a chance to show you a lot of different things, you'd see that it goes in a lot of different directions, so not just that. But I guess I'm showing you this image and talking about this, what I feel is like my own confusion about what visual thinking can do right now, or how dangerous it could be if it's not properly examined. And one of the reasons why I'm not shooting right now. Okay, I'm going to stop talking about my work and I'm going to talk a little bit about Beta Local and the seminars. What time is it? 8. So I have to do this really quickly. Because we're supposed to be done at 8, right? So maybe I won't talk a lot about Beta, except to say that Beta Local is this amazing place, artist run space in Puerto Rico that we started in 2009, I think it was? Yeah, 2009. And that's not it. I'll just show you some images. I won't. Preview. Quite unexpectedly. And that's why I can't show you some images. Okay, so the reason, I'm just going to show you really quick a bunch of different kinds of work. It's an artist-run space, and it has like a kind of free school component and a program that goes on for about 9 months, where a group of people do kind of collective research and production together. Many different kinds of open events. We support the development of artist projects, whatever the end result might be, whether it's an exhibition or a book or a completely different thing, a concert. And one of the things that I think is important to say about Beta Local is that we didn't think, we need a series of exhibitions, or what we need is. We sat down first to think, let's not take a model from other spaces. Let's think about what is necessary to do here. How we need to think with what is here. And so those programs and projects came out of that process of thinking. And then, so I'll talk a little bit about the seminars. I could talk about Beta Local forever because, it's 10 years of projects and it's a kind of collective artist process that has provoked a lot of other organizations and projects to happen. But I'll talk a little bit about this seminar. So actually, in a situation very much like this, just talking about my work, I can't remember where, a student someplace asked me, what was the relationship between my teaching practice and my work? And I remember being really confused by the question at the time, and I had to answer that there was none. Because at the time, if I taught in any way, I usually did it within a classroom, showing work in a situation very much like this, and this situation actually has its order and of what is possible to say and what is not possible to say or do. You're all sitting there and I'm standing here with some images, we're kind of in the dark. All those things do something. So I started thinking, if I were to actually teach from what I do, from what I think is important, really, then what would be the form of that teaching? And so I started organizing these seminars that are walking seminars. So we go walking for 3 weeks and sleeping. We usually have so we know where we're starting and we know where we're finishing. And we have some idea of maybe 2 or 3 places that we want to hit along the way. But I definitely haven't done the walk before. I don't know exactly what we're going through. It's very important that nobody actually has done it. It's almost impossible to have done it before alone. We live together for 3 weeks and cook along the way. And when we find stuff that can be cooked right there and fruit from the place. We try not to be on the main roads. Most of the seminars that we've done have been very coastal because the coast can serve as a guide. But that also means that we're crossing mangroves and we're looking, places that you used to be able to walk along the beach. There is no beach anymore. It has taught me a lot, this process. One of the things that happens, there's kind of 3 things that happen at the same time. On the one hand, you're going through a specific place, so the first time I ever actually crossed through the huge Navy base, Roosevelt Roads, it was in a seminar. So we knew we were going to go through land that used to be a military base, and maybe when we're there, that's when we meet with Pedro Ortiz, and he's talking to us about the place, and we're talking to somebody else who's a geographer and works on similar issues. So we're thinking about the place and the history of the place, and we're also thinking sensorially with whatever trace of the place can tell us things that you actually can't learn from a book. So, for example, the places that we were most worried about going through, which were mangroves in the south, that we had miles and miles of mangroves, huelleros, people who catch crab, basically live inside the mangrove and make paths all year round. So, in fact, there were huelleros had paths that were completely followable all the time. Wherever there were huelleros, we could cross. So actually, after just 2 or 3 days, we learned to talk to them in order to figure out what the right paths were. In Vieques, where there are 3,000 wild horses make paths. So there's certain kinds of activities and people and animals that you must have in order to be able to move like a human and not like a car. Even in some of these walks, a friend of ours, is everybody exhausted? A friend of ours followed us with a horse for some parts of it, and he had to stop after about a day and a half. Even the horse could not go where humans could go. We walked with somebody else's dog for another period of time, and the dog could not go where humans could go. Here he is. And then, so it makes you, so there's a kind of you're learning history of the place, you're talking about this, you're also thinking sensorially, but then there's something that happens to your body as you walk, where after 2 or 3 days, you have this really finely tuned machine that is sensing changes in the weather, in the humidity. You're seeing things that you would not otherwise see. It's not this fantastical thing. It's like you're walking and it's boring. There's nothing happening until something incredible happens. And the only way that you can actually be there to sense it is if you have had this process in your body for a few days. If you have been finely tuning your machine, you also get to be in places that you would normally not be able to be, like underneath the bridges and, in places where people are throwing the atarrayas and fishing and not expecting to see a human. And you, I'll just show you a few more images. We get really dirty after a few days, but it's always possible to find a place to wash our clothes. This is a glass that fell in a salina, so salt covered its edges. This is a structure made by polleros within the mangrove that are semi-permanent. You can find even places to sleep within the mangrove that they've made. So we were really thrown off after the hurricane and didn't do a seminar during the year. And then during the last 3 weeks, we said, okay, we have to absolutely do it. We can't let a year go. And we just did a walk for only a week in Yabucoa, in the east side of the island, which is exactly where the hurricane came in. I don't think we could have done it for more than a week because actually there wasn't any place to. There are a lot of things didn't still have running water or. There were places where we could sort of replenish ourselves. So, I think you could probably see that there's a connection now between ways of teaching and there's also something else about this way of teaching, which is a kind of teaching without teaching. I'm actually not very much of a guide or I'm not teaching anything about photography or about film when we're doing this. Self-organization and everybody being responsible for themselves and a kind of anarchist process is at work. So, for example, we don't know where to go. Nobody says it's this way, but we all have to decide together what we're doing. And throughout all this, we're also thinking about art and aesthetics and how the place, thinking with this object is a kind of magnificent thing. So I'm going to stop there. Yeah.